Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Surah Al-Maa'idah, ayah number 41. قال الله تعالى: يا أيها الرسول لا يحزنك الذين يسارعون في الكفر من الذين قالوا آمنا بأفواههم ولم تؤمن قلوبهم ومن الذين هادوا سماعون للكذب سماعون لقوم آخرين لم يأتوك يحرفون الكلمة من بعد مواضعه يقولون إن أوتيتم هذا فخذوه وإن لم تؤتوه فاحذروا ومن يرد الله فتنته فلن تملك له من الله شيئا أولئك الذين لم يرد الله أن يطهر قلوبهم لهم في الدنيا خزي ولهم في الآخرة عذاب عظيم. We notice here that Allah calls the Prophet Rasul. This is unusual because normally He calls the Prophet as Prophet, Ya ayyuhan nabiyyu. But only in 2 ayat of the Quran does He call the Prophet as a messenger. This is one of those 2 ayat. The other one is in the same surah of Al-Maa'idah, ayah number 67. Other than these 2 ayat, He refers to the Prophet as Nabi. So in this ayah, He's consoling the Prophet. He's saying, do not be saddened or grieved over those who yusari'una fil kufr, meaning race to or rush to kufr, from those who say we believe with their mouths, but their hearts do not believe. In other words, He's talking about the munafiqeen. They rush to kufr, and this would sadden the Prophet. And Allah Azza wa Jalla is saying that you need not be sad. Do not let that affect you. And then He turns His attention to the Yahud. He says from the Yahud, that is to say from the Yahud who rush to kufr as well. So the munafiqun and the Yahud, both of these parties rush to kufr. He says both of these, samma'una lil kadhib, they listen to lies. This is from their priests or rabbis who alter the meaning of the Torah. They chop and change and try to fit the current fashions and fads of the times they're living in, as opposed to maintaining integrity to the Torah. He says they listen to a people who have not come to you, or those who are not present in your gathering, O Prophet. So these Yahud will be listening to some other people who are not in the gathering of the Prophet, and these other people would be feeding them lies. Whereas what is upon them is to listen to the Prophet and not to other people telling them lies. He says, يُحَرِّفُونَ الْكَلِمَةِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَوَاضِعِهِ. They are making tahrif, meaning the Yahud make tahrif, which is either to change the words and letters of the ayat of the Torah, or it means to change the meaning from its apparent meaning to some secondary meaning. And this would be in order to have the text agree with their own whims and desires. It is also possible that the ayah means that the Yahud, what they would hear from the Prophet, they would distort it. That is to make tahrif. Tahrif is distortion. And both these meanings, because they are not contradictory, are acceptable. Now some Mufassirun have said that when Allah Jalla wa Ala says about the Yahud, يُحَرِّفُونَ الْكَلِمَةِ عَنْ مَوَاضِعِهِ, as in elsewhere in the Quran, which we have read, then this means that they are making ta'wilat fasida, corrupt interpretations. One of those far-fetched interpretations which the ayat of the Torah does not support. As opposed to when He says يُحَرِّفُونَ الْكَلِمَةِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَوَاضِعِهِ, this refers to actually taking words out of the Torah in totality to change the meaning thereby. So it's not a matter of ta'wil or interpretation, it is a matter of actually doctoring the words per se. So notice the difference. In the first instance, they are not changing the words, they are just coming out with corrupt interpretations. And in the second instance, in this ayah, they are literally changing the words per se, which of course is going to have an adverse effect on the original meaning. يقولون, they say, meaning the knowledgeable people of the Yahud are saying to the blind followers, if you are given this, then take it, but if you are not given it, then beware. So what is this referring to? There's some background to this. The Yahud came to the Prophet because a couple of their community members were guilty of adultery, and in the Torah they had stoning to death for the adulterers, but they made tahrif and they changed the rulings, and they changed it to blackening the faces and parading these people on donkeys. But they wanted somewhat official confirmation from the Prophet. So if the Prophet gives a ruling which agrees with their corrupted rule, then they would take it. But if he does not, then they would not take it. So you can obviously see that these are just a people of desires. No integrity whatsoever to the text of the Torah. Then he goes on to say, whomsoever Allah wants their fitna, literally meaning trial or tribulation, here it refers to misguiding them in this life and punishing them in the hereafter. Then he says that you will not be able to, O Prophet, avert it from them, because of course you cannot oppose the qadr of Allah Jalla wa'ala. He says those are the ones whom Allah does not want to purify their hearts. That is to say, purify it from kufr and guide them to the deen of al-Islam. He says they will have a khizi, meaning a humiliation in this life, and in the akhirah, that is the life after death, they will have a painful torment. Adhabun azim. So reflecting on this ayah, we take that Allah calls the Prophet a Rasul, and this is a title of honor. We also find that giving solace to others is from the actions of a believer, as Allah Jalla wa'ala does here to the Prophet. We also find that Iman is always about the heart. So your tongue can say whatever it does, but ultimately it's about the heart. Similarly, if somebody utters a word of kufr just to save themselves, but their heart is at rest with Iman, then this would not harm them. This ayah teaches us something about the Yahud, is that they are people who listen to and obey lies. And this is even to this day. You will find them regurgitating and circulating lies. You also find from this ayah the arrogance of some of the Yahud, in that the knowledgeable ones amongst them would not sit with and learn from the Prophet because they feel they are better than the Prophet. We also learn from the characteristics is tahrif, and we spoke about that before. And we also learn that the Yahud are people of desires. They will just take from the text which fits their desires, and they will reject which opposes their desires. And so anyone from this ummah who exhibits the same traits has a resemblance to the Yahud. We also take a vital lesson of Aqidah, which is that Allah has irada kawniyah and shar'iyah. And we have a good example in this ayah. He says, whomsoever Allah wants their fitna, meaning to misguide them. The irada here is kawniyah, not shar'iyah. Otherwise, the irada shar'iyah is that Allah wants everybody to be guided. So irada shar'iyah is His love. Irada kawniyah is His mashi'ah, His will. So for some people, He wills them to be misguided, and He does not want to purify their hearts of kufr. This is all irada kawniyah. One may ask, well, why would He want to misguide people? Well, firstly, being guided by Allah is not a right, it is a privilege. Second point is, this privilege is only given to those who are humble to the truth, not those who are arrogant and stubbornly embedded in their misguided ways. So when Allah knows that someone is stubbornly embedded and entrenched in their misguidance and has a love for this misguidance and a hatred for guidance, then Allah will seal their hearts and misguide them and deprive them of His mercy, which is guidance. So this is their punishment in this world, that is, to have their hearts sealed. There's a similar ayah in Surah Hud where Nuh alayhi salam says, وَلَا يَنْفَعُكُمْ نُصْحِي إِنْ أَرَدْتُ أَنْ أَنْصَحَ لَكُمْ إِنْ كَانَ اللَّهُ يُرِيدُ أَنْ يُغْوِيَكُمْ وَرَبُّكُمْ وَإِلَيْهِ تُرْجَعُونَ. He says his nasiha will be of no use if Allah wants to misguide you. You see, irada kawniyah. Otherwise, the shar'iyah irada is that He wants people to be guided. That is to say, He loves people to be guided. We also find that if Allah decides to misguide someone, there is nothing you can do about it. And this is a good thing because it means that you do not need to grieve over these people who have become misguided or those who are rejecting your message when you give them da'wah. You do not need to care about them and you do not need to grieve for them. You simply leave them to their own devices and give da'wah to someone else, perhaps with an open heart. We may consequently also take that it is worthy for you to make dua to Allah Jalla wa Ala to rectify your heart and to purify your heart from all forms of kufr and evil and detrimental characteristics. Ayah 42. سَمَّاعُونَ لِلْكَذِبِ أَكَّالُونَ لِلسُّحْتِ فَإِذَا جَاءُوكَ فَاحْكُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ أَوْ أَعْرِضْ عَنْهُمْ وَإِنْ تُعْرِضْ عَنْهُمْ فَلَنْ يَضُرُّوكَ شَيْئًا وَإِنْ حَكَمْتَ فَاحْكُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ بِالْقِسْطِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُقْسِطِينَ. In this ayah he's speaking about the Yahud. He again says that they listen to lies. This is simply a reaffirmation of the previous ayah. He says أَكَّالُونَ لِلسُّحْتِ. Akkal meaning one who eats much. لِلسُّحْتِ they consume much. Suht, this is haram wealth such as riba and rishwa, bribery. It comes from the verb sahata yashatu, which means to crush, because this type of haram earning crushes the blessing in your wealth. He says that if they come to you, meaning the Yahud, then you can either judge between them or refuse to judge between them. Here the Prophet is given a choice. The ayah says, but if you turn away from them, as in not judge between them, then they, meaning the Yahud, will not be able to harm you in aught. And he says, if you do decide to judge between them, then you must judge with qist, with justice, meaning in accordance with the Sharia. Indeed, Allah loves those who act with justice. The word qist and muqsit are words which we have come across before. Reflecting on this ayah, we see again that Allah reaffirms that the Yahud listen to lies, and even in this day and age, in the digital age where lies can be spread easily, one needs to be careful about what one reads and hears, and do not be so quick to believe everything you read and hear. Always be checking the facts. We also take that anyone from the Muslim who consumes haram wealth, then such a person has a resemblance to the Yahud. And note also that haram wealth will destroy the barakah in your wealth. That is why it is called suht. We also learn from this ayah that the Prophet is given a choice to judge between the Yahud or to turn away from them and not be the judge. But why would he turn away from them? And the answer is because the Yahud, when they came to the Prophet for judgment, they are not seeking the truth. They just want the Prophet to judge in accordance with their own desires. And they are not going to accept the judgment which does not accord with their own desires. So these people are not serious about the truth, and so this is why Allah Jalla wa Ala leaves the matter to the Prophet. So if there is a greater benefit in judging between them, then the Prophet is to judge between them. But if there is no greater benefit in judging between them, and that the Prophet knows that these people are just messing about, then you turn away from these jokers. It should also be noted that many mufassirin say that this part of the ayah, meaning the choice to judge between the Yahud, is abrogated when Allah gives the command وَأَنِحْكُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ, and judge between them with what Allah has revealed. So if it is abrogated, then the matter is clear-cut. If we say that this part is not abrogated, then the way to explain it is, as we have said, if you see a greater good in judging, then judge. If you do not see a greater good in judging between the kuffar, then do not judge. As for if Muslims come to you for judgment and you're a qadi, then of course you must judge between the Muslimin in accordance with the book of Allah Jalla wa Ala. We find that if the Prophet turns away from them, then they will not be able to harm the Prophet, as in physically harm him. They may be able to annoy him by saying things which annoy him. That is true, but they will not be able to physically harm him because Allah protects him. We also take from the ayah that if you are going to judge, it must be with qist, with justice, so that you have to follow the text even if it be against your own self and against your own family members. We also take that Allah loves those who deal with justice, and that love is one of the attributes of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Ayah number 43. وَكَيْفَ يُحَكِّمُونَكَ وَعِنْدَهُمْ التَّوْرَاةُ فِيهَا حُكْمُ اللَّهِ ثُمَّ يَتَوَلَّوْنَ مِنْ بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ وَمَا أُولَئِكَ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ. So here he's asking the question, how can they, meaning the Yahud, يُحَكِّمُونَكَ, from حَكَّمَ يُحَكِّمُ تَحْكِيم, to make someone into a hakim, into a judge. How can they make you, O Prophet, into a judge when they already have the Torah and in it there is the hukum of Allah? Meaning they have the answer already. The background of this ayah is what we have discussed about the case of stoning the adulterer to death. Its ruling is in the Torah, and yet they came to the Prophet for a judgment, and the reason is, we explained, they were hoping that the Prophet would give them the lighter punishment, which is to blacken their face and to parade them on a donkey. But of course their plan backfired. When the Prophet told them to read from the Torah, and the reader blocked the ayah of Rajam, and Abdullah ibn Salam, who knew about the Torah, ordered the man to remove his hand, and lo and behold, there was the ayah of the Rajam. And so the Prophet ordered that these two people from the Yahud be stoned to death. So this is a question in this ayah of ta'ajjub, of astonishment. They come to you for judgment, and yet they refuse your prophethood, whereas they have the hukum of Allah in their hands, in the Torah. This is truly shocking. It makes no sense. But this is what happens when you are a people of desires and just pick and choose and want to go with the opinion which suits your whims. He says, ثُمَّ يَتَوَلَّوْنَ مِنْ بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ, and then they turn away after that, meaning after you, O Prophet, have given them the ruling which is in accordance with the Torah, they turn away from this ruling. وَمَا أُولَٰئِكَ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and they are not believers. Meaning they do not even truly believe in their own scripture of the Torah. So what about believing in the Quran? So reflecting on this ayah, we find that anyone who seeks the easy opinion in the deen has a resemblance to the Yahud, as we clearly find from this ayah, and the one prior to this. We also find that in the original Torah sent down to Musa alayhi salam, this was the speech of Allah Jalla wa Ala, His words, His ruling. But of course the Yahud, in their desires and whims, changed much of it, as we find, for example, in Surah Al-An'am, Allah asks, قُلْ مَنْ أَنزَلَ الْكِتَابَ الَّذِي جَاءَ بِهِ مُوسَى نُورًا وَهُدًى لِلنَّاسِ تَجْعَلُونَهُ قَرَاطِيسَ تُبْدُونَهَا وَتُخْفُونَ كَثِيرًا. Say, who sent down the book which Musa came with as a light and guidance for mankind, which you, O Yahud, are making it into qaratis, paper sheets or parchments. You disclose some of it, but you conceal much. We also find the recalcitrant and rebellious nature of the Yahud, in that even after the Prophet explains to them what the correct ruling is, they still turn away and are averse to the ruling. So the point is that these are the types of people we do not want to be like. So it is vital for us to know who our role models are and also who our anti-role models are. Both are important. So you have the do's and don'ts. Ayah number 44. Inna anzalna at-tawrata fiha hudan wa nur yahkumu biha an-nabiyyuna alladhina aslamu lilladhina hadu wal-rabbaniyuna wal-ahbaru bima استحفظوا من كتاب الله وكانوا عليه شهداء فلا تخشوا الناس واخشوني ولا تشتروا بآياتي ثمنا قليلا ومن لم يحكم بما أنزل الله فأولئك هم الكافرون. So he tells us we, meaning Allah, using the royal we, sent down a Torah. In it there is hudan, guidance, and nur, light. Now really huda and nur are both guidance, but because they are mentioned in close succession, some scholars have said that Huda means bayan, making clear what the rules are in terms of aqidah and practice, and that the Nur is that part of the Torah which removes any doubtful matters, any specious arguments that people may have. Others have suggested that the Huda is making plain the fiqhi aspects of the deen, and the Nur makes plain the aqidah aspects of the deen. It is also said that Huda is the knowledge and the Nur is the effect of that knowledge. So the effect of the knowledge is that you become righteous, and it has an effect on the way you speak and behave and how you act in life. These are the effects of your knowledge which you have attained. So you can easily tell the difference between a knowledgeable, cultured person and an uncouth, ignorant person, just by the way they speak and the way they behave. He says, using this Torah, the Nabiyun, the prophets who submitted, meaning became Muslim, judged with this Torah. And he's referring to the prophets after Musa a.s. Notice how he says, الَّذِينَ أَسْلَمُوا, those who submitted. All the prophets were Muslims. لِلَّذِينَ هَادُوا, they used to judge with it for those who were Hadu, meaning the Yahud. Note when he says Hadu from the verb Hada Yahudu, which means to return, and this refers to when they returned in Tawbah after worshipping the golden cow. He says وَالرَّبَّانِيُّونَ وَالْأَحْبَارُ, meaning the Rabbaniyun and the Ahbar also would judge for the Yahud using the Torah. But these are two key terms, Rabbani and Ahbar. So Rabbaniyun, plural of Rabbani, and we have Ahbar, which is the plural of Habar or Hibar. They both mean learned people or scholars. But is there a difference? Some have said that the Rabbaniyun are of a higher status than the Ahbar because they are mentioned first in the Quran. Others have said that the Rabbaniyun are pertaining to the Yahud and the Ahbar are for the Christians. They say Al-Habr Al-A'zam, meaning the Pope, that the Rabbani gives tarbiyah, which means to nurture and to culture people upon the worship of Allah Jalla wa Ala and His obedience, whereas the Habr or Ahbar are merely knowledgeable people or scholars in the deen of the Yahud and Nasara, though they do not necessarily give tarbiyah to the people. Sure, they could answer question and give guidance that way and give the fatawa, but tarbiyah is something different. It requires more consistency and more contact with the people, just like a parent gives tarbiyah to their children. It's not the same as just answering questions and giving fatawa, and Allah knows best. But the point is that the Rabbaniyun and the Ahbar would use the Torah to judge for the Yahud. He says, بِمَا اسْتُحْفِظُوا مِنْ كِتَابِ اللَّهِ. So he says, bima, meaning bisabab, because of. So these Rabbaniyun and Ahbar would teach the people and judge using the Torah because Allah had entrusted them, the Rabbaniyun and Ahbar, to protect the book of Allah from any tahrif or any corruption and doctoring. So the verb is istahfadha, yastahfidhu, istihfadhan, which means to make someone into a hafidh. A hafidh is a guardian, one who protects or preserves. So they were made into guardians of the Torah. So you see here, Allah Jalla wa Ala did not take the responsibility of guarding the Torah and their scriptures from the Yahud and Nasara. He made the people, the scholars, guardians of their scripture. But as for the Quran, Allah Himself takes the responsibility to be the guardian. He has not left that job down to the people. And herein lies a massive difference between the Quran and the other scriptures. وَكَانُوا عَلَيْهِ شُهَدَاءَ. They were witnesses over it, meaning these learned people stand as witnesses that what is in the Torah is the Sharia, the law of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Because only knowledgeable people can stand as witnesses, not ignoramuses. It is also said that they were shuhada, as in they were ruqaba, watchers. So they were overseeing the Torah that it should not be corrupted. So this was their responsibility because of their knowledge. And we can say that both of these tafasir are acceptable because they're not contradictory. So the role of the learned people was to stand as watchers over the Torah, and also to stand witness that this is indeed the real law of Allah Jalla wa Ala, as opposed to some fabrication. And then he says, do not fear the people, but fear me. He's speaking to the Yahud, meaning you should not fear to implement the ruling of Allah, even if the other people may hate you for it or may abuse you for it. Don't fear them, fear me, and keep your integrity to me, Allah Jalla wa Ala is saying to the Yahud. And he says, do not purchase for my ayat a thamanan qalilan, a small price, meaning do not sell my ayat out. That is to say, for the riches of this world you would judge in accordance with the desires of the people, and in return they will give you what you want from bribery money and from positions of power and these types of materialistic gains which you can attain if you just sell out the ayat of Allah. He's saying do not do this. You also notice the iltifat. He was referring to the Rabbaniyun and Ahbar, that is third person plural. Now he's saying فَلَا تَخْشَوْا, do not fear. He's referring to them in the second person. So it's from third person plural to second person plural. That is your iltifat. So ultimately he's telling them, do not fear the people and change the ruling, nor do you change the ruling out of your greed for materialistic gains. And he ends by saying, whoever does not rule by what Allah has revealed, then such are the kafirun, disbelievers. So as for a person being a kafir, some scholars said that this refers to the Yahud who do not judge by what Allah has revealed. However, the wording is general, even though it does come down in reference to the Jews, but the wording is general, so we go by the generality. Because the ayah says, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ, whoever does not judge. As for a person being a kafir, then let us delay this discussion till ayah number 47. So reflecting on this ayah, we take that all the prophets sent to Banu Israel were Muslimun, as explained previously. As for when he says لِلَّذِينَ هَادُوا, then like we said, hadu means to return, when they returned and repented from worshipping the calf. Otherwise all the prophets sent to Banu Israel were Muslimun. We also learn the virtue of the people of knowledge, in that they were entrusted to safeguard the book of Allah Jalla wa Ala. And with a immense responsibility like this, it means you have immense virtue and a lofty status with Allah Jalla wa Ala. We also find that the knowledgeable people are inheritors of the prophets, because look how he says that the prophets judged with the Torah, and then after them the Rabbaniyun and Ahbar judged. We also learn the strict prohibition not to fear the people. If you have to give a ruling in accordance with the book of Allah, which is anathema to the current fashions and fads of the people, then you do not cave in to the desires of the people. You stick to the book of Allah, even if it means that people deem you to be an outcast. We also learn the strict prohibition against being seduced by the materialistic gains of this world, so that you sell your deen out to gain a small price of this world. And this type of trade is only going to make you a loss. We also learn that the original Torah sent down by Allah Jalla wa Ala, and for that matter also the original Injil sent down by Allah to Isa alayhi salam, was indeed the ayat of Allah, and they contain the hukum of Allah Jalla wa Ala, not the scriptures that the Christian holds in their hands, the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, and the letters written by Paul. All of this is not the Injil that Allah speaks of, because these Gospels and letters were not sent down by Allah to Isa alayhi salam. They were written far after his life. هذا والله أعلم.